The Heat were shorthanded again. Players come in, players go out, and still they held a lead versus the Cleveland Cavaliers for most of the game, but let it slip away from them late until Terry Rozier took over, scoring 9 points in the final minute and 24 seconds to steal the big-time road win. What a game, and we break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always is longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Recording this on Wednesday night after the Heat beat the Cavs 107-104. No Bam Adebayo, who was ruled out with a bruised lower back for this game. No Duncan Robinson, who flew to Miami to deal with his own back issue. Still no Tyler Herro or Kevin Love, but this was all Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier. 30 points for Butler, 24 for Rozier, including 2 step-back threes and 9 total points in the final 90 seconds to put the game away. David, what did you make of the win and Rozier stepping up with the big shots late?
It was a fantastic game. They showed a lot of tenacity. Jimmy Butler consistent throughout the game. Niko Jovic coming back into the lineup after having missed the previous game. But Terry Rozier being able to dominate the way he did late in the game. After the Philadelphia loss, a lot of people questioning whether or not getting rid of Kyle Lowry, trading for Terry Rozier in the process was the right move. This is why you acquired Terry Rozier, because he is fearless in the moment, because he just doesn't care, because he is such a gunner, willing to take those shots when nobody else in the Heat roster, even Jimmy Butler, weren't willing to take those shots. Terry Rozier stepping up, hitting big-time shot after shot, hitting a 4-point play, then another 3-pointer seconds later, sealing the game with 2 free throws. What an incredible performance. This is what makes Miami so much more dangerous, I think, than even last year's team that went all the way to the NBA Finals, because you have that complementary score. So much pressure put on Jimmy Butler, the front office, and everybody else to see whether or not this team could become even better or perhaps seal the deal and finally win a championship during the Jimmy Butler era. The acquisition of Terry Rozier is what makes them more dangerous. I know it's been inconsistent. I know it hasn't always been this good, but when he steps up like this gives you a glimpse of exactly what he's capable of and why he's such a dangerous scorer.
That's it, right? That's why you make the trade. Kyle Lowry, at this stage in his career, he just wasn't taking those shots. He was not a factor offensively. Terry Rozier, 20-point scorer in Charlotte. Overall, I know people have had concerns about Terry Rozier's efficiency since joining Miami, but you look at his larger body of work, and look, he hasn't been Luka Doncic consistent in terms of like efficient scoring, but he was more efficient than he was in Miami. And when presented with a large sample and a small sample, I tend to go with the large sample. And so I always assume that eventually it would kind of snap back to the point of Terry Rozier being an efficient scorer. And tonight was one of those nights. I mean, overall, 8 of 16, so 50% shooting overall, 5 of 6 from three-point range. And man, were some of those three-pointers tough that he made. 24 points overall on a night that the Heat desperately needed it. Jimmy Butler had 20 points in the first half of this game and then just 10 in the entire second half. But it was Terry Rozier scoring 11 of his 24 points in the fourth quarter. And like I already said, 9 points in the final 90 seconds to put this game away. I was texting with Locked On Cavs host Chris Manning, who was at the game. Yeah. And he was like, Terry Rozier is just going to make a couple of big shots late and put this away, isn't he? And he texted me that at like the 8-minute mark of the fourth quarter, and I was like, I don't know. We'll see. One thing I know for sure is it's going to be a clutch game, and we both called it. It ended up being a clutch. Miami gave up another 11-point lead, ends up being a clutch game, and Terry Rozier makes the big shots late. This is, to your point, David, you're exactly right. This is why you trade for Terry Rozier. You just need another guy who could do this sometimes. You don't need him to do it all the time, right? You need Jimmy Butler to do this all the time. You kind of just need Jimmy Butler to score around 30 points a night if you're going to get to where it is that you want to go. That's just the way that this team is built, even when Bam Adebayo is healthy. But you need the points from Bam Adebayo. You need the points from these other guys. But between Terry Rozier, Tyler Herro, Duncan Robinson, even Caleb Martin, Jaime Jaquez, like they just have more of those guys who could just erupt for 18, 20, 24 points on any given night. And those are the kinds of games when they're done by your role players that can kind of tilt a game from an L to a W. And that's what happened.
Yeah, no, I looked kind of bleak, to be honest with you. I really did not think Miami was going to be able to mount that kind of comeback. So shout out to Chris Manning, who might be a little bit of a fatalist, especially when it comes to the Cavaliers, in terms of whether or not they'll be able to hold on to a lead. And we should point out, look, no Donovan Mitchell. They were missing Max Strus, no Evan Mobley. So they were with their fair share of missing players too, but they just had a big win over the Indiana Pacers on Monday, a clutch game for them that they won in the expiring minutes of the game. And, they're a good team, a great defensive team, even without those key players that we mentioned. And they looked like they were doing a really good job of defending Jimmy Butler in the second half. I think, Jared Allen is probably having an underrated season by a lot of fans. He's really, really good. Just a big body in there. He's really good at finishing at the rim, obviously, but he's a hell of a rebound and shot blocker, et cetera. So he's a very, very good player.
20 rebounds tonight.
Yeah, he was a monster out there. And despite that, Miami made the adjustments. And maybe sometimes it's just crazy wild shots, like you pointed out. A lot of them were really tough shots from Rozier, but his willingness to take them is huge. And it's not like he's just putting up really bad shots. It's within his repertoire, right? The sidestep, three-pointer, the fadeaways. Those are things that he's taken throughout his career. And for better or for worse, all that, which makes him so inefficient at times, when he's willing to take them and when those shots fall, he becomes such a dangerous player. And you just need that complementary score. Like you said, there's a lot of weapons out there for Miami to add one more to the arsenal. Like, just even as a theoretical, what would Kyle have done in that situation? Maybe he would have been on the floor. Maybe not. We saw last year, he wasn't even the closer. Given the injuries, maybe he's out there on the floor.
Yeah.
He'd be out there. But what would he have done? Deferring to Jimmy? Let Jimmy take those three-pointers as we've seen in the past?
He would have walked it up, or he would have came up with pace, but then pitched it to Jimmy coming off of some screen, tried to set some small guard thing, which the Cavs did an awesome job sticking to their guys and not giving Miami the switches that they wanted. Oftentimes it still ended up being Okoro or LeVert, their best wing defenders available, on Jimmy Butler or Tyler Rozier or whoever it was. And like Jimmy Butler hit a crazy turnaround 18-footer in the fourth quarter. Over LeVert. Did not get the switch he wanted, still took the shot and made it. So he made some big shots late too. To speak to how hard those Tyler Rozier shots were, obviously just in a vacuum, stepping back against one of Cleveland's better wing defenders and making that shot, getting fouled on one of them, and then going to the line and converting on the 4-point play. Like, that stuff by itself is difficult. It's especially difficult when the entire offense has been in the mud for 3 or 4 minutes, and these are not just like big shots that you happen to make when your team is making a bunch of shots and it's a little contagious and you're just making tough shots with everybody else. No, these are tough shots when your team is in the mud and nothing's working. Here, I started tracking the last 4 minutes here of Miami's offense. It was not pretty for a couple of minutes there. So here's basically what happens. Jimmy Butler goes into a post-up at the end of the clock, does not get the switch that he wants, heaves up a bad shot. That's what happens. They miss. Next play, Tyler Rozier ends up, like, a bunch of guys just sort of screen for each other, pass the ball around with no real plan. Tyler Rozier ends up throwing it to Caleb from like 5 feet away. There's absolutely no spacing. Caleb rushes a corner three-pointer at the end of the clock. It doesn't go in. So that was a bad possession. Next possession, Nikola Jovic drives into the big defense, which didn't turn into any rotations. Basically, Cleveland's big defenders, Jared Allen, everybody else just stood there, waited for him to come, and just forced him to pass it out. A couple other guys did the same thing. Fake drives and kicks into Cleveland's not rotating defense. Passed it around. Ended up getting Nico a corner three that he missed at the end of the clock. So another rushed bad possession. And then Jimmy Butler drive with Jaime not really spacing. Jaime kind of like he's on the same side, so it wasn't even an empty side pick and roll. Jaime's still filling that side, but he's not even filling it all the way to the corner. He's just still like right there by the post. So terrible spacing. And then they were fortunate that George Niang fouled Caleb Martin, and that's what ended up stopping the run with 2 minutes. So it was a bad 2 minutes. And then after that is when Tyler Rozier makes the first step back three, and then shortly after that he makes the other step back three. So that's how big this was. If not for Rozier creating something out of nothing, the Heat lose this game. They blow the lead, they lose this game, and we're here doing another post-game show asking what happened. Instead, we're doing a post-game show saying this is why you got Scary Terry in the first place.
This is the odds, right? In terms of basketball, like pure ISO gunning, the last of the true gunners, Terry Rozier here, picking up the ball and doing what needs to be done. Like it was really impressive. And Okoro, a good wing defender, as you put it up before, has a sizable height advantage over him. he still gets that step back. Really, really impressive play from him. It was just a great display. A lot of fun to watch. With Miami comes away with a victory. Had those shots rimmed out, again, it would be a very different tone to the whole podcast, but his willingness to take them, I think, should be lauded. And now you have him, you have Tyler once he comes back from injury. You still have Jimmy. Bam with the ever-burgeoning three-point shot. Jaime Jaquez has taken those shots before. Caleb Martin, as you said before, like these guys have taken these shots in the past. It's a much more well-rounded cast than has been in the past. I've said it all season long. I think this team is deeper. While the record doesn't necessarily reflect it, they're deeper, they're better, they've got more options now. That's why you acquired Tyler Rozier, just to give you another threat as a long-range bombing threat.
It cost you Kyle Lowry's expiring contract and a future first. I mean, it was a steal. It was an absolute steal. And people said that at the time, but that's even more true now. Credit Cookies is next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure could be right around the corner? Well, our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. You start off with the 2024 Nissan Rogue. I drive one. It's the perfect combination of being able to get around the city, but also being able to pull out on the weekend for a great escape somewhere, your next adventure. Who knows? Maybe you want to take a trip to the Everglades. Hop in your Rogue. Class Exec exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. You've got the great 12.8-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. It's fantastic. Really, really clear. Really great. I love it. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. But if you want to go a little bit bigger, go for the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It's got room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and an advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. And if you want to go bigger still, there's always the Nissan Armada. It will change what you expect from a full-size SUV, a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, David, it's time to get into time to get into the kitchen for the tastiest segment of Locked On Eat. It's time to hand out some credit cookies for another Heat win. Who's getting cookies tonight?
You put out the poll, who gets more cookies? Is it Terry Rozier? Is it Jimmy Butler? I've got to disagree with most of the people who responded. I'm giving the bulk of the credit cookies to Jimmy Butler. The fact that he came back after missing a couple games and he was as good as he was early to help set the pace. Like Miami doesn't have a lead to blow in the first place if not for Jimmy Butler. And while Terry Rozier stepped up late, Jimmy Butler was the one who was carrying them for 75% of the game. 30 points, as you mentioned before, 6 of 7 from the line. So the new officiating rules didn't really cut into his scoring all that much to go along with 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals. How many of those plays where he intercepted a pass or just simply bullied his way into the passing lane, took the ball and was able to break free for an open basket, changed the course of the game, especially again early in the first half? While Cleveland did come back, I think Jimmy Butler gives Miami a better chance of winning the game because he was so good early on. But you got 3 credit cookies for Terry Rozier. Maybe not a perfectly efficient night earlier in the game, but for him to be able to step up and hit those big shots late, what a turnaround. Great to have him on the roster. Great to see all the team kind of rallying behind him after he hits those shots. Really great for him. And then I've got 3 credit cookies, 1 apiece to Thomas Bryant, Orlando Robinson, and Niko Jovic, who comes back from injury and is in the starting lineup right again. I look what Jovic did, hitting some big shots, really good on some defensive possessions as well, making some sharp passes, spacing the floor. Also was 4 of 10. 4 of 10 from three-point range. That's 40%. That's fantastic to go with 14 points. But Thomas Bryant pulling down 10 rebounds, muscling his way. Not an easy assignment to take on Jared Allen, but I think he held his own. And when he comes out back to the bench, because you need to give him a rest at some point, given the fact that he hasn't played a lot of minutes all season, Orlando Robinson, fresh off a game with the Sioux Falls Skyforce just the night before, steps up big, has some nice moments there. Again, pulling down some big rebounds, getting some shots at the rim. Really nice. Hit a three-pointer as well. Yeah, he was. Yep. 1 of 1 from three-point range from the corner. Great shot from him. We've seen him take it. It was really, really good game for him. So those are my 5 recipients of credit cookies tonight. I want to shout out Caleb Martin as well, who did not score very well tonight, but did a really good job defensively on a number of possessions.
So I had basically the same names written down. I had maybe 2 cookies going to Bryant, 1 to Orlando Robinson, and a shout out to Nikola Jovic. But I'm okay giving all of them a cookie. I'm not going to argue with you on that. Nikola Jovic, you mentioned all the things that he did well, and it was well said. One other thing I would add, especially in that fourth quarter, setting a lot of screens for Jimmy Butler. It was basically Jimmy calling Nico up, and I already mentioned how Cleveland did such a great job navigating those things. But even if Nikola Jovic was just creating a little bit of space, a little bit of something for Jimmy, that was fine. But to me, the more interesting part of it was that Jimmy was asking for him to set the screens in the moments that mattered the most. And I think the way that Jovic has developed as a screen setter, he's doing it more physically. He's obviously added the weight. He talked to us last week about kind of creating more muscle in his build and kind of chiseling the frame and turning his body around. And you can just tell that that's true based on the way he's setting those screens. He's not Bam as a screen setter. He's not even Thomas Bryant yet, but he's getting better, and I just think it's noteworthy. Jimmy Butler, I'm with you. 4 credit cookies for him and 3 for Terry Rozier. That feels right to me, considering the body of work that Jimmy Butler put into this game. 30 points, his first 30-point game since March 2nd, his first 20-point game in 10 days. It has not been playoff Jimmy very often recently. And then he gets 2 games off, obviously, and then he comes back. And, I made the joke on Twitter. I was like, hey, I think everybody's freaking out about Jimmy Butler too much. As long as he only has to play once every 10 days, he'll be just fine. But that's what look, he was fresh,
he looked recharged.
And he looked recharged. And you hope that this is something that can create some juice for the next few weeks, especially with this homestand coming up against some tough teams, starting Friday against New Orleans. And then they obviously have the Cavs again on Sunday night, that time at Kaseya Center. So love to see that version of Jimmy Butler. And when he's doing that, it makes everything so much easier. It makes Terry Rozier sort of a release valve and a guy who can just make some relief shots and big shots late and not a guy that you're necessarily relying on. It allows Caleb Martin and Jaime Jaquez just to score 8 points apiece or whatever it was for them. 7 points for Jaime, 4 points for Caleb, right? 8 points for Orlando Robinson off the bench. But you've got Jimmy Butler just handing the ball off to Orlando or Thomas Bryant in the dunker spot, finding Jaime Jaquez or Caleb Martin cutting. It just allows those guys to play off of him instead of playing instead of him, instead of trying to score and be the fulcrum of the offense instead of him. Everything just falls into place. And we already talked enough about Terry Rozier. We should explore a little bit more Thomas Bryant and Orlando Robinson because I thought they were both excellent on a night without Bam Adebayo. It has been an up-and-down year for Bryant. It has been an up-and-down year for Orlando, and that might be putting it nicely for those guys. And with no Bam, still no Kevin Love, and even with Spo playing Nico at center to close both halves, those guys made the most of their minutes. It was 15 minutes for Thomas Bryant and just under 13 minutes for Orlando Robinson. And look, I thought they gave, what is that? Do the math for me. 15,
28.
13, 28. 28 solid minutes of center play. Not spectacular. They did not outplay Jared Allen. They didn't even play to Jared Allen's level, but that was not the job today. That was not the assignment. It was don't get torched. And they didn't get torched. And they didn't lose those minutes by very much either. They actually, Orlando Robinson, they outscored the Cavs by 4 points in Orlando Robinson's minutes and outscored them by 6 points in Thomas Bryant's minutes. So that I don't know that you can ask for much better than that.
No, I mean, I think collectively you watch these guys play and you're going to have like a negative perception because Bryant has been so clunky, particularly defensively. He just hasn't had a lot of opportunity. His minutes haven't popped at all. But to have a big body there, to be able to just sky and pull down those rebounds. And he was very Kevin Love-esque in terms of like just grabbing onto the ball and he wasn't letting it go. And it was so important for Miami to be able to retain those rebounds so that they could limit second chance points from the Cleveland side of things. When you have such an active rebounder, 20 rebounds again for Jared Allen, like you want to be able to keep him off the glass, because if not, he's going to be able to lay it up, draw a foul, dish it to somebody else in a Tucker spot. Like there were so many different things that could have changed had he not been able to pull down those boards. And 10 rebounds in those minutes that he played, 15 minutes, that's a heck of a night in terms of his production. You're not going to count on much scoring. He was 0 of 2 from 3-point range, but again, the willingness, the ability to take the shot. I mean, you just kind of remember at the start of the preseason, like I think it was Bobby Marks. I don't remember exactly. It was an ESPN pundit talking about Miami having the best backup center in the league. Of course, that did not exactly. I don't remember exactly who it was. It might have been the Coach Thorpe. I think it was Coach Thorpe actually. Yeah. In any case, that was the expectation, right? He was showing good minutes in the preseason. Eventually, lost favor with the coaching staff. Just really didn't seem to ever find a way to thrive there. But to have him as a legitimate weapon, somebody who can shoot to three, who can body up down low, the defensive issues are still, they're going to be there because I just think that's the nature of who he is at this stage in his career. But he's gotten better, I think. And tonight he was solid overall. And again, just the rebounding is such a big part of what helped make him so efficient and help Miami be able to build that lead early on in the game.
Credit cookies for Jimmy Butler, Tyler Rozier, Thomas Bryant, Orlando Robinson, and Nikola Jovic. Congratulations. We get Pat Riley some gifts for his birthday next. Today's
episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, BetterHelp, you've heard us talking about it before. Sometimes we all just need an opportunity to get something off our chest, right? Big or small, certain things can certainly start to get to you, and it's important to let it out. There's no shame in that. There's no stigma. There shouldn't be a stigma. There is, unfortunately, about talking about your feelings. I know men in particular have a hard time. Like we've been taught, we've been kind of indoctrinated to think, just keep it all in, keep it kind of push it down, right? And then I think that's become very dangerous. And as a society, I'm glad that we're being much more open. And we cover athletes for a living, and those athletes have been much more open about the stress that they feel on a daily basis, the kind of challenges to mental health. And if you're going through something similar, you just want to talk about whatever issues you might be going through or whatever concerns you might have, or just, again, to get something off your chest, then give therapy a try. It's great to have somebody that's unbiased that you can kind of talk to, not a friend, not a coworker, not a family member, somebody that's just going to listen to you, to hear what you have to say and give their expert opinion. So if you're looking to try therapy, again, give BetterHelp a try. It could be different for everybody, but most of us have bigger problems at our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. And again, the whole thing is entirely online. I said it before. It's really flexible. It's really easy. It's designed to be that way and suited to your schedule. You can pick and choose whichever therapist you want to work with. If your schedule changes, you can't work with that therapist anymore, you can find somebody and they'll do it super quick. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Go visit that and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions using that hashtag AskLOHeat on Twitter. You can email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com, Locked On Heat on Instagram as well. All right, let's get to some of these questions. This first one comes from me, David. Pat Riley turned 79 on Wednesday. What would you get him for his birthday if you could get him anything?
You proposed this question, and I thought, what do you get for the man who has everything? I remember reading like Blood in the Garden by Chris Herring and talking about the kind of details that Pat had woven into his contract. And I forgot, like, he's a part owner of the team. He gets like a per diem. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know. Obviously, at that point in time, he was brought in to be, he was brought in to be the coach. And now that he's retired as coach, like I can't imagine the idea of he'll getting a check for like $300 a day or whatever as part of his per diem. Like, that would be just silly, right?
Oh, the per diem. I thought you meant the ownership stake. No.
The ownership stake. Yeah, no, he's probably still got that. But yeah, like getting a per diem, that just seems a little unlikely. But they bought his house. They had a car. They had like a chauffeur service, like a personal chef, like all these different things. So this is a guy who's had everything. He's had like he was LA when LA was just growing as a team, and just the Showtime era and everything else like that.
You got
He's
Adrian
hobnobbed
Brody
with
playing him in
celebrities.
a TV show.
Yeah. He's had everything. Like, I was thinking, like, what do you get? Like, his favorite musicians? You get Bruce Springsteen to sing him a really hoarse voice happy birthday a la Marilyn Monroe. I don't know if that's going to do it for Pat at this point in time.
Does Bruce
he's
jump
done
out
so
the
much.
cake?
Yeah. So to me,
Shirtless
the only
Bruce
thing.
Springsteen.
Hey, happy birthday, Pat. Oh, I don't know if that's going to cut it for him. But, I think, the only thing that really matters to Pat Riley at this point in time is a championship. So that's what I'd get him. And I know it would make a lot of people happy. Maybe that's too easy. Get him that championship so he can finally, as was written like a decade ago, so he could finally retire and go to that convertible that he's kept in the garage at his Malibu mansion, his Malibu beach house, so he could just drive her off into the sunset a little bit more proud and get, what is it? I don't even know how many championships total he has now. I can't remember the math exactly, but just get him another ring. That's all he wants. He wants to get Jimmy a ring. He wants a ring for himself. I think it would be really, really justified.
Yeah, I was going to say get him LeBron James' phone number in case he lost it. Maybe get him Luka Doncic's contact for the agent.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I like
that. All right, just one more star, one more chance to put the rings on the table and get one more superstar. Because that's how you get that next ring, right? One more superstar. Maybe a time machine to go get like Prime D Wade back and bring him back to 2024 and put him in there so he's not podcasting. Instead, he's scoring points and being the most dominant scorer in the league for a couple of years. That'd be great. All right, let's get to some of our real questions. This one comes from Andrew. Is Scary Terry our new closer? Seriously, though, you could see Jovic getting more minutes other than his normal 2 stints in the playoffs. Oh, sorry. So that's two separate questions. We'll talk about Jovic in a little bit and some playoff stuff. Is Scary Terry our new closer is the question from Andrew.
I think we kind of addressed it early on. Like, I don't think he's the closer per se. He's one of many options that you have as a closer. You've got Jimmy Butler. Everybody kind of forgets with all the trashing of Tyler Herro that's been so fashionable of late that he was viewed as one of the closers in Miami. Like, his rookie, I remember covering this team by myself his rookie season when you were off covering the Warriors, and like, he stepped up big on like a number of occasions. And I remember Spo saying in post-game press conference before the pandemic, we've got a lot of guys who embrace the moment, who live for this, who love the challenge of being able to close games. And Tyler was one of them. And we've kind of forgotten that. I don't think he's had a lot of opportunity because, Jimmy's been kind of tried to come into his own. You've got Bam Adebayo stepping up in that opportunity sometimes. And now you've got Terry Rozier too. So I think you just have a lot of options. I don't think he's the closer. I still think it's ultimately Jimmy. But if something breaks down, I think Jimmy would have to admit that he's probably more comfortable dishing it off to a Tyler or a Terry Rozier or somebody along those lines because of the way that they've stepped up recently.
That's exactly right. You play off of Jimmy Butler. Whether he's taking the shot or creating the shot from somebody else, it's very LeBron-like, isn't it? Where LeBron doesn't have to take the final shot, but he's going to create the final shot for him or for somebody else. And that's what Jimmy Butler's going to do. And we've seen defenses key in on Jimmy more than ever kind of during the stretch of the regular season, packing the paint, doubling him early in the clock, and all those things. Yeah. And what's that going to do? It's going to open up things for Terry Rozier. It's going to open up things for Tyler Herro. It's going to open up things for Bam Adebayo under the basket or maybe from three-point range, since that's what Bam does now anymore. So interestingly enough, Bam is Miami's leading fourth quarter scorer this year. Now, that's partly because he plays more minutes. He plays 10 minutes at each fourth quarter. Jimmy obviously takes a little bit of a rest in the fourth quarter, then comes in later. Points per possession, Jimmy Butler still leads the team in the fourth quarter in fourth quarter points per possession. Terry Rozier is actually second, slightly ahead of Bam Adebayo. This next question comes from Brian. Is this Heat team more perplexing than last year's between not sure who's playing, what kind of effort you're going to get from certain players, the team as a whole on any given night? We could be quick with this one because it feels like we've been talking about this basically over the last couple of months. The answer is yes. I thought last year's team was perplexing because it always felt like they would have a great possession and then the great possession would end up getting an open three-pointer and then somebody would clank the three-pointer. And I was like, I can't tell if this team's good or not because they're getting good looks, but they can't make the good looks. So I don't know if the team's good. But that was it. That was sort of like the end of that was my only question about the team. And then those three started going in and they went to the finals. So it turns out that they were good. This year, I don't know anything about this team because this team's always hurt. And I don't even know what it looks like. And I don't even know what the preferred starting five is. And I just got so many other questions. So the answer quickly is yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't know. I think it's kind of like an extension of last year. Maybe it's just a different variation of the confusion that began last year, but it is a little bit more confusing just because they do have all these different players that are just trying to assimilate and get incorporated and find out exactly what they can do and when they can do it. And it's just been a challenge for fans and even coaches and the coaches themselves. So it's just it's interesting to see how it's played out over the course of the season.
Let's do this in 1 minute. Mark writes in, after Thomas Bryant's decent little stint tonight, do you think he cracks the playoff rotation if he continues playing solid minutes? David, what do you think?
I don't think so. I don't. I wish I could say otherwise just for his sake, but at the same time, I think we kind of have forgotten, conveniently what Kevin Love has brought to the table and his strength in these moments, the fact that he's played in big moments before, the fact that he got those minutes last year too. I know there wasn't really another option, but I don't think Thomas Bryant, I know he's an option and Spo can go to him if he says, you know what, let's change things up. But that seems really unlikely. You go smaller in the playoffs, at least that's how Spo typically has. I think you bring Kevin off the bench. If Kevin's hurt, and that's always a possibility at his age, or given the tough grind of the playoffs, maybe you bring in a guy like Bryant, but I don't think it's likely.
This Thomas Bryant to me is like a first round in the playoffs kind of guy, maybe a little bit in the second round, but he's not a conference finals guy. He's not an NBA finals guy, and that's basically what it was for him in Denver last year, right? He was not in the rotation by the time the finals came about. If there's a matchup against Philadelphia, Orlando, Cleveland, New York, kind of bigger teams, maybe he gets some run, but you nailed it. Kevin Love, if he's healthy, I just don't know where the spot is for Thomas Bryant other than maybe situational foul trouble, something like that in those specific matchups. But there's a difference between, we always talk about playoff rotations. There's a difference between the first round of the playoffs and as you go deeper in the playoffs, rotations shorten, they change. And like you said, you tend to just go with your better players and maybe even just go small, which obviously Thomas Bryant wouldn't be a factor in that. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.